All right. Hello, it is JP Rindfleisch the ninth, and I am here with Office Hours. I have some friends with us, and I will go Danielle, Lisa, and Sauron. I would love to know who you are and what do you write?
Hi. So I guess I will start. I'm Danielle Bonneau. I'm from Quebec, and I'm writing a historical novel on that is set in late 1800s and early uh, 20th century, and it's set about actually it's loosely set around my family, which has a very common name in Quebec called I mean, people that live in Montreal, they all know the Carry Auto Road, so it's loosely based on that family that used to run a huge melon farm that is, of course, now non-existent. And so it's plunging us back into another way of life where times were hard and babies were coming like almost every year, but they were also dying at an alarming rate.
Yeah, excellent. Uh, I mean the the babies part is, sad, but excellent in terms of writing the story. Lisa, let's hear from you.
So I'm Lisa Monod, and I live on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And I am writing a sort of coming of age story for somebody in their middle age, finding themselves in the position where they're retirement, forced retirement, or chosen retirement with sort of an adventure to discovering who my main character discovers who she is, goes back to who she is, and and along with that are aging parents, sexual issues, finding a a death, and finding new love or not finding new love, and so it's sort of a little bit of what sort of also a little bit based the beginning of it very based on my experiences, and then it sort of takes off from there. And my character's actually been rewriting it a little bit by herself as we go along, so it's very interesting. But that's what I'm doing.
Excellent. And Sauron, you are on mute. Sauron, you're on mute.
Oops. Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, so I'm Sauron Desai. I'm from Mumbai, India, and so I have a couple of thoughts, but the one that I'm working on at the moment is it's a combination of alternate history and magical fantasy. So it's basically a coming of age, but at the same time, it is also about the Spider-Man, great powers come great responsibilities. So magic is not just all about fun. The thing is, I love magic, and one of my dreams is that if I could actually do real magic, right? Not illusion, but real magic. That's like the one thing I really would want. If you ask, give me a superpower, that's what I would want. But so I'm trying to kind of play with that in terms of how you know you want something, but when you get that, it also comes with a set of responsibilities and duties, and nothing's for free. So if you get something, you always have a price to pay, whatever that might be. So trying to play with that.
Excellent. Um, I think in terms of the questions, I would like to start with Sauron and focusing on like some of your questions on craft. Would you like
Mhm.
to hit us off with one of your questions and we can sort of discuss it?
Sure. Uh, so one of the things that I kind of am struggling with is how does one kind of you know especially the middle that kind of gets muddled. So I have an interesting start. It kind of moves along, all those technical inciting incidents and all of that happens, and then I have a vague idea about where I want it to lead to in at the end, in terms of all of that. But in between, it kind of just goes all over the place. So either it gets too stretched, or it kind of wraps up too quickly. So I'm not being able to kind of find a sweet spot in terms of being able to get whatever I need to across, get all the conflict, get all the struggles across, but still not stretch it. So how do I deal with that?
Okay. Okay. And for office hours, feel free to always jump in or ask questions, or if you have different experience, like this is not the JP show, just so we're all clear. But I really love this question because this past weekend I had an author workshop where I got to listen to the wonderful Anne Garvin, and she talked about story structure. And yesterday I just finished talking with Daniel David Wallace, and all of
Wow.
us have this similar concept to story structure. So it was really fun hearing stuff that sort of is a little reaffirmed. And
Mm,
ultimately, the middle of your story is where all of the meat of your story happens, right? It's where
mm,
we learn and we have our pitfalls, and where we develop our story. When people will immediately remember a story and will like reflect on it, it's almost always the middle part of that story. Beginning
mm,
is connecting with the character, seeing through their eyes and feeling that. But there's this middle portion. Uh, all of us sort of have this similar concept where characters that are driving the story have this refusal to do what they want to do. It's this
mm,
resistance to change. And
mm,
so even if they go forth with the decision of, and I'm going to use the example that was this weekend of going to law school, like
mm,
that's the big story, let's say, is this character
mm,
going to law school. This resistance to change is based off of the fact that they want, this character may want respect from their father. That doesn't
mm,
require a lot
mm,
of change for that character, but they're still
mm,
moving forward. They're resisting doing this internal work, this like
mm,
learning experience of like, why am I going to law school? If it's honestly to please others, that's not a story, you know. We know as writers, we're gonna hit this point where something might happen. It may be as extreme as his character's father might pass away, or they may fail law school, or there just may be something within that middle part of that story where the character realizes that wanting this respect from their father is only going to take them so far, and they really have to dig into who they are as a person to decide if they're going to continue this path. And so all of that to say, when I think about story structure and how it flows within the story, that all of that resistance to change is the first half of the book, as
mm,
opposed to the
mm.
first act of the book. Um,
Okay.
and so
Mm,
it's
mm,
almost like you can build up to that point. So let's say that this character wants to go to law school, they want respect from their father. That means that our first part of the story, when we have that inciting incident, which is the decision to go to college, we now have the point from college until this midpoint where they need to do the deep work, where they are succeeding at a class, and they're, you know, can't wait to tell their dad that they're doing so good because they want that positive reinforcement. And then either they get it and it's not enough, or they don't get it at all, and so then we get that loss feeling. We'll
mm,
probably have a scene or two where they absolutely fail at something, and now they feel like they're letting their father down, and now they
mm,
have to dig, and they have to like, they're afraid to tell their father because they know exactly what that response is going to be. And we're going to have these ups and downs through this point where they're not doing the, I'm doing this for, let's say, myself, or they're just trying to please their father until halfway through. And then we can play with that other half of the middle part of the story, where now we
mm,
have to do that deep work, where now we have to really question, am I here for me? Am I doing this? And what does that look like? Now, I'm
mm,
still at college, I'm still doing my plot points, let's say, but now I may be actually putting myself forward, and it doesn't matter what other people think. And maybe I can really apply some things that are about myself into my work, and I can really excel, and I might have failure moments. Uh, in terms of Western storytelling, you've got that midpoint, and then it usually leads into like that quote unquote dark night of the soul. That's going to be the moment of like, is this worth it? Is this something that I want to continue doing? Is this something that'll help me grow as a character? And so I'm hoping you can kind of see a trajectory of how a story might flow. And it's really that resistance, because a lot of humans don't want to change. And so we will look for some type of a surface level reason to do something, but we usually refuse to do that deeper work and really question why we're doing what we're doing. And so hopefully what you can see is that if you can lead up to that midpoint when like push your character all the way to a point where they have to dig deep and they have to really question what they're doing, then that can lead on to the other half of your story.
Okay, so just to just to kind of figure out whether I've got this right. You're saying that, quote unquote, they're kind of resisting and passive until the middle point, and then they get a lot more active post the midpoint. Is that what we're kind of saying?
Yeah, more or less. And it's a lot of that like learning, and there's I'm trying to think of other stories as I'm talking, and that never works well. But that first half of that portion is a lot of external learning. So
Okay.
even in like magic school, it's a lot of taking in information, but
Okay.
it's not as much as that internal interpreting that information.
Okay.
So
Got that.
as a reader, we're enjoying this because we've got, let's say it's a magic school, we've got this character learning magic that's cool as hell, and we're seeing these different aspects of the world building, and there may be some underlying thing, and let's change the script and say that a kid gets to go to magic school, and the only reason that they're really like driving to go is because their father was the best magician of all time, and now they want to be that same version, and so they're learning information and they're really excited. But there's going to be this midpoint where either they're not as good of a magician at all, or their magic is dangerous and in comparison to their father's, or something along those lines, where they have to reach this point in the story where they have to dig deep and they have to question, like, can I really follow in my father's footsteps if I'm this version? And what does that mean for my future? And so now we can dig into those pieces and really explore that deeper work.
Got that. Makes sense.
Cool. Okay. And so your next question was kind of about like how long. It depends on what kind of story you want to tell. I could see that being a full-length novel. We have a big portion leading up to that midpoint of learning magic, learning about how they might want to be in comparison to their father, maybe some history about their father. Like I could see that being 10, 20 chapters, and then the other half of diving deep and really questioning, like, what is, let's say it's weird magic, what's my magic in comparison to the rest of the world? What does that mean? How does that reflect? And answering those sorts of questions can yet again be somewhere around the 10, 20 chapters. It could also be a couple of chapters if you're writing a short story. It just depends on how much you want to dig into each of these. Cool. Okay. Any other thoughts?
I have a question. Like, I mean that sounds in line with a little bit of what I have looked at with like the story structure. And I really love the I'm just trying to think of what I'm writing. I love the fact that you're sort of building up to something where there's lots and lots and lots of questioning, and then you get this like, oh my God, I gotta figure, like something happens in the middle, because that's always what I was reading, that Start from the Middle, the book Start from the Middle. I can't remember the name of it.
Oh yeah, it's like James Scott Bell writing from the middle.
Yeah, writing from the middle, right? Which really made a lot of sense. Like there has to be one thing in the middle that connect with with a villain, the villain, or another type of villain, and then they're going to figure out finally in the end what they're all about. In my case,
Yeah.
but are there variations on that? I mean, like I feel like my
100%.
mind has like different pieces at the very beginning because I have her having to go to this place and this place, having to challenge herself in different ways. And then it's hard to explain without explaining the book, but so there's got to be different ways of getting there.
Yes, yes.
I
will say
I'm not
something.
being very concrete about that.
Right, but I'll definitely say something that may be quote unquote controversial to some, but story structure, it at the end of the day, if it doesn't work for you, there are thousands of different versions of story structure, right? And there's no one true way to tell a story. A lot of Western storytelling is more or less built on white men telling stories for a long time. And so it misses out on how there may be variations on how a story can be told. And so I love looking into structures, and it was really interesting that the conversations I had this weekend, there were a lot of similarities, but there are still a lot of differences that I just didn't touch on how we view story, because we're all going to view how structure forms differently. I think that what you're getting at is ultimately your character is leading up to these points and you're opening up questions. And so that's another way of thinking about story structure is you're opening these loops, and this is another way that I like to think of story is like you're opening these questions, opening these loops, and we reach a point where now we need to start closing the loops and start basically stitching things together and making sense. And so in terms of what we were just talking about, let's say that we're opening a lot of these loops in understanding the story world and understanding how magic school story, and understanding how the father fits in this world, how I fit in this world. And now we're going to start closing those loops. And that's the big tough work. How do we close those loops? How do we answer questions about like how I fit into this world, and how maybe the information I was given about my father was incorrect about this world. And now how can I close those pieces? So yes, my answer to your is story structure, can it be different? Absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense, opening loops and closing loops, because you can open loops all over the place in different ways. And when I read a book and I'm like, oh, that wasn't very satisfying, it's because they didn't close them in the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Left me with something, or it went too quickly. Like all of a sudden, boom, it's done. And then I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. That was like way too or easy or quick. And so I feel like that whole last part, in essence, should be closing those
Mhm.
loops, not leading up, and then all of a sudden crashing down at the very end.
Absolutely. And there is, I think Maria Robinette Kowal talks about this, and I don't know where she has stated she got it from somebody else, but it's the concept of the mice quotient, MICE, and it's 4 ways in which you can sort of open a loop. Milieu, oh man, I'm a character, which is C, event, and then inquiry is the I. And it's basically you're opening it by a question or by sort of like a surroundings, like entering in a new scene. A character that comes into the picture, or a difference about a character that happens, or an event. The character is murdered. That's an event. But we're opening loops. We're bringing in sort of this start, and then we're going to close them as the story progresses. And she likes to view it sort of like computer coding, which is like nesting things. So let's say that we introduce a character, and then we introduce a big world event. By the end of the story, a humans sort of like patterns, so we'll probably close off the event before closing off the character. So we'll finish up whatever that big question is about the event, and then finish off how the character responds to that and how they interpret the world. And so that's like another way of doing story structure, especially if you're really big and nerdy and you like loops and you like sort of that programming concept, where you can think about like, am I opening something that's nested in the thing above? And if I am, maybe I close that before closing that one that's above. Does that make sense?
Just a different way of looking at it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's for me, I love all of these, and I sort of like have them sit, and I just sort of make my own thing out of every little structure that exists out there because I just find them all fascinating.
But at the heart, it's always the character's growth
Yeah.
that drives the action.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. I think that a lot of stories have that character growth. There are some that are different, but usually in a lot of storytelling, it's very character growth focused, or there at least is a pretty strong change in that character. Yeah. Lisa, you had a question.
Yeah, so I was having a little trouble last night sort of putting it coherently as I was thinking about it, but um I I'm writing, I'm at the very beginning of it. So I have my whole plot, so I know who all my characters are. And I'm trying to get the beginning sort of major thing that happens that creates my character's need to leave, to flee,
Mhm.
to get out of her situation and go to a new situation where she's going to encounter yet another challenge. And so
Mhm.
in and it came from having a conversation with somebody about uh, I was struggling with trying to figure out how two characters were going to interact. And the feedback I got was that, or the questions I got, it wasn't really feedback, it was questions on, I read through the scene to somebody and they were questioning like, how deeply do you know your character? Like it feels like this character is one-sided. And so
Mhm.
I know my main character really well. And it's only the first, like, we were reading maybe chapter two, what would be chapter two. So the very beginning, I don't want to give everything away. Yet I, the challenge to me was like, how, how much do you give away at the beginning? How do you start giving things away about that character without confusing your reader like why is this happening, and you're like, well, then the next chapter you'll find out. So it leaves open some questions, and then you're going to solve those questions because this person has to have conversations with, it's in the um, first person close. So
Yeah.
I'm not giving the thoughts of other characters. It's all my main character, very close, very personal. So she cannot tell what this person is thinking. Yet that's an
Yeah.
important part of why he's acting the way he is. And so my question was like, how do I get those, how do I get the complexity of the character because it's needed for the decision she's going to make or understanding the story and get that out without going to the third person, which I don't want to do, or getting a new point of view character. So that's part of
Yeah.
it. And then how like I I don't know how much of somebody do you give away all the time. Like, can you have characters who you don't really know a lot about, and sort of they're just there, and is that okay? Or do you really have to get out the complexity of all different characters in order to make it really interesting? I mean, I'm gonna say I think yes to that second question, but I'm like that's a lot of. I said to this person, if I start putting in all the different characters and adding in, for example, it's in an office setting partly, and I'm only focusing on three of the characters or
Mhm.
four, one little like minuscule character as well. But there are other people there, but I don't talk about them.
Yeah.
So it's like, do I need to, or can I make it sort of focused? All of
Yeah.
this was like, how do I not make this thing gargantuan, which is really the very first part of the story, and not make it huge because there's a feeling of needing to know who these characters are, and is there more? Are there more people there, or why? How many questions do you ask yourself? That's a lot of. I know I just said a lot, but that's sort of
Yeah.
where I'm stuck.
So, and I'm gonna guess here that one of the reasons that that feedback came back is less about the information of that third character or that other character and more about that first character that you're sitting in and how much they know about
Right.
them.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I think that um it's more about creating that connection with the reader and that primary character. Uh, I'm not going to say that I do this well, but I'm going to use examples from my own work just because this is how I'm thinking it through. Um, in Mandrake Manor, my first chapter, I have a character who is going over this inheritance letter. Then they are going into a law office and they're meeting somebody for the first time. That is a mysterious person, and there are weird things that are already happening in chapter one that they are just like, I don't understand any of this. I'm introducing the character in a way that I'm hoping is very like connecting. Um, I have them frustrated because they have like this time scale where they were given this letter and they literally have to go like almost the next day. And so they're frustrated. They reflect on their the fact that their mother was involved and he doesn't like his mother because she's just kind of a terrible person. So he has like one or two thoughts about her. And then he goes and meets this person and they're mysterious, and he panics because that man is dressed in a suit and he is in not a suit. And he's just like, am I supposed to be in a suit? And the guy just sort of chuckles and he says, some of my clients wear many weird things, or something along those lines. That's a weird thing to say, right? That's kind of strange. That's just a way to sort of add depth to that character and add that question of like, what does he mean by that? I'm not saying some of my characters are werewolves because that would be too much information to give away right now. But hinting at there is more to this world than what this character can say. And like there are weird things he says because a building appears out of nowhere and he's like, buildings come and go. Again, the reader is with and sitting with that main character. Like, what the hell does that mean? What do you mean buildings come and go? That doesn't make any sense. And so what I'm trying to do in that first chapter is really sit in that first character and offer up this depth of not only the world, but the way that this other character is interpreting the world without giving too much away. And I don't know if that, how I would necessarily interpret that with your story, but what that might be is, it could be a reminder of a previous time that they had together. If they know each other, like, you're acting like you did a year ago when mom died. I don't know, something like that. Again, that just opens up the question, what do you mean they were acting like that when that happened? Like, and so you sort of build that depth to your primary character, and you add that there are stories that exist outside of this story to just sort of create a little push or a little anchor point. I think in the Dark Pawn series, our main character, her mom has this whole other life that she had no idea about. And so there are things that she does in that first chapter when, actually second chapter, when our character sort of like wakes up from this really weird dream where she's like doing something weird, and it's all about like weird magic that exists in the world that the main character has no idea about. But she just thinks her mom's like holding her head and looking at her weird for a minute. And she's like, mom does this all the time. That's, whatever. We as the reader, we're like, what are you doing? This is weird, but we're just like, we sort of accept it, we sort of don't. And again, we're not, as the writer, we're not giving away everything. We're just doing actions that maybe our main character sees as commonplace, but we just sit in it for a little bit longer to show that there's something more to that so that we can build on it later. I don't know if that helped.
Yeah,
Hopefully it started to.
I put in some, I did put in some of the connections in the past. It's her boss. And so she doesn't
Okay.
know your boss. And
Yeah.
working at this business for a very long time. And so she's having these conversations with her coworker about the past. So you know a little bit of that he sort of hasn't changed. He is the way he was. But it's like she can't put herself in his brain. And he's
Mhm.
never going to tell her how he feels. So there's this like block between the two of them. Like he does not, he has never trusted her. He's not going to, and she is desperate for that and has never gotten him to trust her or listen to her. So there's this
Yeah.
real disconnect between the two. And so I was like, how do I? And they had this very big argument. She actually crosses over a line, like does something that's really not what she should have done, and he gets really angry at her, and so you see that part of it, but you don't know what his motivation is, and we'll
Yeah.
never hear it from him in the book. We'll
Yeah.
never hear it from him. So So I guess maybe that is a little. I have a little bit in the past, and then she's gonna have a the thing is that the conversation that's coming up next will give a lot of insight into what she's feeling, a lot more than that argument has given. And then I was gonna have them just sort of speculate what he might be thinking, why he might be acting that way, to put that in there. Because
Yeah.
somehow we need to know why he's doing this. Like, we need to
Yeah.
know a little bit more about him. But is that sort of, how much depth do you give him? Do I need, for example, do I need to go into his past? Do I need to know what type of person he is? That's the question. Is like, how deep do I need to
Yeah.
go into this one person? I mean, he's a catalyst for a big change, but he will disappear after this moment and never come up again, ever. And so how
Yeah.
much effort do I put in? Like, what was he like as a child, or what, like,
No.
why? Yeah, this person
Yeah.
was saying, I don't know this person, there's no depth to this character. I'm like, he's really providing one role, and that is to
Yeah.
push her up,
Yeah.
literally. That's what I'm looking
So what I would probably do in this situation, and from what I'm like sort of interpreting from what you have said that your reader has said, so again, grain of salt, but would be to add texture into how your character interprets this person. So maybe before the conversation, it's sort of this like anxiety of having to talk to this boss again,
Yeah.
and how like they never listen. And, then during the argument, bring up a time where he never listened and something negative happened. Don't you remember 2 years ago when XYZ happened? If you had listened to me then, we would have solved the problem. Now
Mhm.
we've added depth to that character. Of course they don't listen, and there was something that happened a few years ago. So we're adding in a context to the characters without diving deep into a story. And maybe then after that, and she's sort of processing, and maybe if you really wanted to add more depth to this character, you could say something along the lines of like, maybe I shouldn't have said that. I mean, I feel bad that his wife died 2 years ago or whatever. Again, just adding in that like one line there, but adding depth to that character if you wanted to. Um, that's sort of how I would approach it, because again, like that character, I don't need to know their backstory, but as the reader, but as the writer, I think that it's important to know the pieces that where he doesn't really change. He's sort of this stickler, doesn't listen to her. Um, I would maybe ask why he doesn't listen to her. Is it just her, or is it other people as well? Um, and then move from there, just sort of because he functions as a catalyst, which makes him something that's a little higher than just a character that you sort of run into, because we do need to know just a little bit as to like why she is moving into this story at this point in time.
And how his actions are affecting her.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I can see where I can add in a little bit more. I like the idea of going back and saying, 3 years ago, blah blah blah. I could
Yeah.
certainly build something in about that, and I have with another character done that, but it probably also needs to be with him, because his
Yeah.
reactions to her are very strong, and she's
Yeah. Yeah.
like, these meetings are very hard for her. She doesn't quite know what to say, and she's always like she would rather be silent than speaking. And so
Yeah.
um okay, I can definitely do that.
And especially if that is at the beginning of the story and we really want to connect with her, we will want to know that maybe even before going in, that she's anxious about it. It doesn't have to be like explicit about him, but I've seen some things where we've got a character who we're it's just imagining we're sitting in a car, or we're sitting in a lobby where we're picking at our fingers, and we're just like, I would rather be anywhere else than right here right now, having to wait for my boss, who I was supposed to meet 20 minutes ago, but they've been in a meeting that they won't leave, and I have to face him with this blah blah blah. Like, I'm already starting to connect with that person because I've been in those situations where I'm really frustrated and I know that. And so like that's how you could maybe create that connection and just add in that little depth of like, of course she's waiting for her boss and you know, she's super anxious about it. So then when we get into the conversation, we can feel that.
Yeah. And what about the idea of ignoring other office people, except maybe to talk about the fact that he's not like that with other people, but then that might bring in, I don't want to open up more characters. It's only a
Yeah.
short part and it's really focused on this, on her changing. And would that be, was that weird to sort of just like hyper focus
I
on?
ignore my other office workers.
Oh, see, that's what I said. I'm like, I don't like,
Well, you can if that's a comment that comes across from a couple of people, and so I would have to read what you were talking about. But what I would probably do in that situation is I might say like this character's already very disconnected. And so maybe someone waves at her and she just doesn't wave back. That's a very quick way of being like she
right,
doesn't care about these other people. And
right,
and depending on how you write it, it may just be like this subtle disconnection. Or it may be like this, I don't even like, I hate this job so much that I don't like the people here anymore either.
all right, perfect.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Danielle, would you like to jump into a question? Danielle?
She can't hear you. Danielle?
Danielle?
Well, I had a question concerning, the story hypothesis,
Mm-hmm.
because, as I mentioned before, the family that I'm writing about was well known, well, was quite prominent, and the let's say the skeleton of my story is a book that was written on, like that registered every wedding, every baptism, and every burial of every member of the family from 1654 to 1910. So that's been like, that's why I know who got married to whom, uh, who got how many kids, how many died, how many survived and got married in their turn. So that's been like my the core.
Yeah.
That's been, and that's how I discovered. My God, such a woman lost 6 kids, another one lost 9, and so that's how I started like. Thinking more of the conditions of the times, and so my it's my fourth version of my script. I've been
Yeah.
working on it for 5 years, so I know my characters quite well. And so it's like, again, like what Lisa was saying. How much when you start, how much, where do you start?
Yeah.
That's been my main, let's say, challenge, because every time in every version I started at different times. And and now I decided to start where, in the crunch of the story, where my grandma's grandma is uh, uh, 8 months pregnant, and her daughter, 6-year-old daughter, becomes sick. So because in the dates I realized that her 6-year-old daughter dies, well, is buried on July 18, 1879, and then she gives birth on the 25th. I mean, it's a baptism on the 25th of July, the
Mhm.
week later. So, and it's a very loving family. So in the growth of my character, I want her to want to do something about that problem, about that crisis with the kids. And she was a teacher, and so that made it logical that she may have been concerned about the children's health for from long time. So, but I thought that her that she would started was with like that fear of losing the kids. So that would be survival. That would be her
Mhm.
main, her main you know, the initial
Want
need
or need. Yeah, yeah.
of her kids, and then wanting to be involved so that she'll go into participation, but at the end being like emancipated and finding herself, you know.
Yeah.
But then I was reading your book, Story Hypothesis, and I'm saying, maybe I had it wrong. Maybe it's love that is her initial need, because it's a love of her family. So, what is the difference if my initial need is either either survival,
Mhm.
because she doesn't have the tools really to be able to help the kids, you know, apart from like a very rudimentary book that she had, you know, information gathered, or if it's actually love that is her initial need.
Yeah. Well, I think that sometimes those pillars bleed over into each other. And so how I would approach if I were to have the initial need being that affection and being that love of the children is that every time that the love is challenged, it will either push them forward or pull them back, as opposed to a protection or survival. Every time that um, there is a loss of protection, it'll pull them forward and push them back. Now, your story, those two are very close to each other. And so, because basically she's losing these children. So it's both the fact that, you know, she can't protect them, but it's also the heartache and the pain. Um, I would, if I were you, I would consider uh in terms of freedom, who is she at the end of the story? Like you say emancipated, but doing what exactly? Like how is she free?
Well, at the end, and it's true, her husband dies. So, uh, but all throughout, but her husband, like, is a prominent, you know, like he's the mayor of the city. So and they have ties, you know, that enables her to to assist to like her brother-in-law is like best friend with one of the um you know, the fathers of the uh pediatrics in Montreal, you know. So that's so she gets firsthand information, okay, and real insight on, my God, what are the parents doing wrong, you know.
Yeah.
And this is like giving the wrong milk that is going that is not kept in right conditions, and that is giving has full of bacteria. And so she will get involved, and also with, you know, at the times women that were in a certain position, they were involved in hospitals and that. So she will be helping out all throughout. And it coincides at the end with the creation in Montreal with dispensaries, you know, where they would
Mhm.
actually help women to better, you know, like know about taking care about the kids. So I mean, it's extrapolation because you know, she was not directly, my great grandmother was not really involved, but it's kind of shedding light on, you know, what women did at the time, you know, and at the beginning of getting, you know, to the beginnings of pediatrics. So that's why, like, she would get free, because then she would be able to really uh, spend her time helping out women.
Yeah. Okay. And in your story, in the first half of the story, can you give me a scene where she feels like she has failed? And I'll leave it at that because I want to know, like, failed as, and I would like you to fill in that blank. Give me a scene where something happens and she feels like she can't move forward. Can you
She
describe
felt,
one?
yeah, because there's another subtext in Quebec with the religion. that was extremely oppressive and extremely, I was ruling the society. And she failed. That's the first part. Her sister-in-law, who's also her best friend, who herself has lost 6 kids and does not want any more kids, and she's asked her to help her to kind of have a potion to be able to, as they would say at the time, push the months, because she thought she's pregnant. She said, I cannot go and
Mhm.
be have another kid, to lose it. And she refuses, and then that friend goes somewhere else further along being pregnant, and she dies.
Mm.
And that
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
the, like, so that would be like,
Yeah.
also something that will bring her reflection, saying, okay, I did not help my best friend
Yeah.
in law, but now what can I do? And she will go against church, and she will go after that,
Yeah.
to help women.
So two things that or a couple things that I'm hearing that I would lean more towards protection. Again, I think that um it's going to depend on you and how you interpret the story, but you have an oppressive force, and so the need to protect from that and push from that. The scene that you provided, she failed to protect her friend. And so giving an example of a scene, and you pick one where she basically failed to protect. And then you also have the true need being this like freedom from things. And so like usually like almost an opposite of freedom is like a protection from things, or getting too oppressive and too protected. Um it's because at the end of the day, these needs were crafted defining human societies, and we're using examples in story. There are going to be all of these needs that exist. And it's sort of which one may be the driving force. And I think that your descriptions that you've given really strongly resonate with protection through acts of love, it could be, or through different acts, but it really seems to resonate stronger with protection. And the only reason I would maybe focus on that, if you want to use story hypothesis as an example, is to think about scenes moving up towards that midpoint and thinking about scenes where your character doesn't protect, like the example that you gave, and something negative happens, does protect and something positive happens, and maybe some other instances in between there, but thinking about it through that story lens to help you drive that first half of the story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So to me, it sounds like it could be protection. Again, I think that those are very close to each other. And I think that honestly, if you wanted to do both, do both. Like it's okay. You can do whatever you want. It's your story. Um, but yeah, if I were using the story hypothesis and I were using your story, I would probably lean closer to that protection need. Cool.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah.
Any other questions anyone has?
Can I? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Is it okay if my questioning is slightly towards the publishing business side?
Yes,
That's fine.
absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So, just two questions. One, is there any advice that you would give someone who's kind of, for me, speculative fiction, but in general, how does one enter the market in terms of I do not really have any background in terms of getting published. So, part two of that is a lot of people tell me that I should build a platform. I should, get on social media and start talking about it. But for me, one, I have a lot of resistance to social media, and two,
Mhm.
I kind of feel that with my daily job, plus all the other responsibilities I have, and then figuring out how to write, actually writing, I'm not really left with any time or energy to put on social media. to build, but then I kind of realized that's important as well. So how do I balance that? So that's one.
Yeah. Okay. So first off, are you wanting to go traditional publishing or self-publishing?
Uh, I honestly, I'm not really, married to either. I'm good
Okay.
with traditional, and I'm also absolutely, happy with self-publishing. The only thing is, if I self-publish, definitely need, of course, I need, I need to have a or so I understand. But if it's self-published, I will definitely need to build, an audience.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
either ways, I still need to figure this out.
Okay. Well, I'll preface this with I am not traditionally published, nor have I ever sought traditional publishing. So my experience with it is a lot of like secondary and tertiary.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
so all that to say, my thoughts on like how with traditional publishing, all I can really say is doing research once you've completed your manuscript and felt like it's good, doing research on query letters and not being dismayed, because that is the most difficult portion of traditional publishing that I know of. And this could be incorrect, but that I know of is the querying process. Because one, a lot of queries get rejected a lot of times before they get the acceptance. And so it is a very difficult I mean, it's basically like the job market nowadays, right? Where you're probably applying to 100 jobs and you may hear back from one. It's the same
Sure.
concept. It's really frustrating from all of the people that I know about, but it is, if that is the direction you want to pursue, I would look up like how some people have scheduled it, because I think I've seen like submitting between 10 or 5 and 20 query letters a week, and just having a plan and just, having an Excel sheet and making sure that you are
Sure.
making that query letter apply to whatever publishing place you want to go to. And so
Sure.
that's how I would look it up. And again, I don't have enough experience in that to really speak on that. But
Sure.
in terms of self-publishing, I will say that being in communities with self-published authors really helps in understanding how self-publishing works, because the groups that I am in, and I would say Dialogue Doctor community is one of them, is a great place to ask questions and get answers from other people who are published, who may be just a little bit farther down the path and who can help. I started in 2017. I was surrounded by self-published authors, and I didn't even question going the traditional publishing route, because I immediately knew the first day that I had 14 other people that I could reach out to and ask questions to. And so it's honestly finding those sorts of communities to be able to reach out to and ask those questions, and uh know that a lot of, especially the publishing part and like putting it on KDP, is free. Don't fall into the paid services that will pay to publish your book. If you're going self-publishing, don't do that. Everything is like free. I've seen a lot of horror stories where people will pay in order to get their books onto platforms, and it's basically just a third party, and you can go direct to like KDP and publish. So be wary. It is difficult, but um can you maybe repeat that question just to make sure that I've covered what you were asking?
Sure. So, no, I completely, and whatever you shared made a lot of sense. And but part two of the question is that from whatever conversations I've had, um, people tell me that in order for whether I'm planning traditional or I'm planning publishing, at the end of the day, marketing is
Mm.
Something that I will have to take care of. And even if it's traditional, it's not that I'm nobody, so to say,
Yeah.
for a traditional publisher. So even if they buy, some luck, I do get published, they'll still expect me to drive bulk of the marketing. So in either case, I need an audience
Yep.
before I get published in order for me to be able to reach out to them, is what I've understood. So I need to be in that sense present, not just present on social media, but actively present on social media as I write, which is what I've understood, that I build my platform, or as I write. And my question is, I work, I have a full-time job. I
Yeah,
have,
yeah.
other responsibilities, which it's not just me. I'm just talking about me, but I'm sure everyone goes through that. And then I'm figuring out the craft of writing. I'm figuring out, how to write. Then I'm writing, and
Yeah.
so then I'm barely getting any time or energy or mind space to then be actively engaged on social media and talk about something that I'm working on. So what do I talk about? Like, okay, I'm working on a book. Who cares? So it's just that I'm just trying to figure out, how does one kind of manage to do all of this?
Yeah. Well, I will say that you don't have to do social media by terms of like all of the different social media platforms. I think that there are plenty of people that don't. And I would say if you're going the self-publishing route, um, learning about like Amazon ads if you are not doing social media is probably the route I would go. I mean, I use Amazon ads, but like if I didn't do social media and I needed to make sure that my book was out there, if I did nothing and I just put it out there with no way of getting eyes on it, it would be lost. So what I would probably do at a bare minimum is Amazon ads. One, because I've sort of learned about them and I like them, and I feel like they work when you get them working right. And there are a couple Dialogue Doctor doesn't offer these, but there are a couple other services around that do. I am a member of the Brian Cohen's ad school. I personally really like it. I think that it's very useful information. So that's one that I would probably use. And then the second thing would be having that newsletter so that when people find you, they have ways of connecting with you. Newsletters, I'm trying to do mine one a month. It's just a really quick like what happened this month and where might I be, because there were like a couple events where I wanted to tell people where I was going to be. So, and like you can intermix that with announcements. Here's the book I'm working on, here's the project I'm working on, here's the coffee I had this morning, something along those lines, so people feel like they can connect with you. I would probably do those two things. And then if you wanted to go the route of social media, pick one and really focus on like how to leverage that by looking at other authors that are doing it as well. So, for example, I personally, if you already feel this way about social media, you wouldn't do TikTok. So let's say it's Twitter, or which I wouldn't do either. But let's say it's, I don't know, Blue Sky. Who cares? Wherever, looking at the authors in that space, what are they posting, and seeing like how can I say something that's similar but more personal towards me, because you don't have to reinvent and have to say the newest most profound thing. You can look at what other people say and think about how it may apply to you. I mean, I know I'm not the only one. I look at TikTok and I see what other authors do, and I just say, like, one, can I either use what they did and just reword to apply to me, which it because it's a silly, stupid meme, and so like, why not do it too? Because it's funny. Or something like that. I don't have to think about like a new 3-minute video of me sitting in front of a camera and chatting about my life, because my brain would explode. That's too much time. I can't think about any of that. So instead I'll make a silly 10-second meme and we'll see what happens. Um, but yeah, I would really focus on, if you don't want to go the route of social media, and there are plenty of authors that don't, how can you get your product in front of people? Because if you do nothing, it will get lost. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in. So I think at a bare minimum, what I would do is like Amazon ads, newsletter, and then maybe moving towards some type of social media. And I would pick one. Don't pick them all. I picked them all. Don't do that. It's terrible. I ignore so many of them. But yeah, that's the route I would go.
But how much time does it take out of your day?
To do what? To do like a TikTok?
Social media, yeah.
I mean, I keep it in the back of my head, and then I sort of just like will flip through a couple because I use social media too much anyway. And then I'll find one that I like, and it'll maybe take me 10 minutes or less. I don't post every day. I used to, and that was too much. That's not for me. I can't do that. So instead, if I find something, or if I see that there's like a conversation that's happening that I can join, I'll make a video about it because I think that it may have some value to it. So maybe I'm not the right person when it comes to social media. Maybe I'm somewhere in the middle, and I'm not like hugely successful in any of them because I can't do the constant grind because I'm a lot like Saura, and I've got all those other things, and I'm just going to do what I can, and see if anything sticks. But yeah, at the end of the day, writing is the most important thing. So do that.
I was gonna say, I mean, I feel like right now for me to begin, so I don't know if it even needs to be published or will end up being published, or I'll be 165 before I finish it. To start something like that, at this point, I feel like I need to write the book first to have something to
Yeah,
say.
yeah,
Unless that social media is your journey. Some people
yeah,
love social media and it can be their journey. That's what they're going for, is how did I get to whatever point I'm going to get to in the future? And maybe that could be fun. Like you just once a week, you're like, this is an update to what I'm doing, if that's what you want to put out there. But I feel like to talk about a book, first you have to have the book written to be able to talk about it.
And I find it's would take a lot of energy. Me too. I decided to wait until I finally get my version, that is finally a good story, and then I'll think about it. About how to promote it, how to, uh, you know. But first it has to be. I mean, I find my energy has to go into writing it and learning how to do a better job. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I will say too, especially, I mean, I would say even traditionally published authors, connecting with other authors is so important. Um, I love hearing this get reiterated by other people because I full-heartedly agree that writing and being an author is not a solitary practice. We do write alone often, but we do not need to be disconnected from other writers because their readers love their books, but then they want more. They want another book. And so if we think about it like this is our reader and not your reader, then we're losing out on so much because that reader will read whatever. As long as it is either vetted by someone or it has the reviews for it or something along those lines. So if we as writers and authors recognize that readers don't pick one author for the rest of their life, that they have plenty of things that they like, if we are able to meet other authors and really lift them up by saying, hey, you like cozy queer fiction that I write? Look at these other authors that I've been reading and I've been enjoying. And now they hopefully will get maybe a few sales and maybe a few things. And then maybe one day down the future, they might point back at you, And so that's a really big thing to do. And it's really important for me is always find those other authors because you may not be on all of the social media platforms, but if you are able to, sort of put them on your newsletter or mention them somewhere, and then they are able to do it in return, that helps so much. And just making sure that authors aren't left in the dust. You know what I mean? So that's one big thing that I would say too. Cool. All right. Well, that's the end of it. Thank you all for hanging out with me today. I appreciate it.
It was very fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.